Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, Joe Manchin really does seem to lean into a just cartoonishly villainous persona. Not content with taking a bunch of corporate cash to sink the climate provisions and Build Back Better, now he's coming after any and all attempts to lean into electric vehicles. So here is the latest. Speaking at an energy conference in Houston, Manchin told the crowd, quote, "I'm very reluctant to go down the path of electric vehicles. I'm old enough to remember standing in line in 1974 trying to buy gas. I remember those days. I don't want to have to be standing in line waiting for a battery for my vehicle because we're now dependent on a foreign supply chain, mostly China." This kind of anti-logic is enough to make your brain explode. I hated gas lines, so let's stick with gas forever? And yeah, because of free market ideologues like yourself, China has jumped ahead of us in terms of securing the resources and manufacturing capacity that we need to build our domestic electric vehicle market. Maybe spend some time on that in your position as a United States Senator rather than carrying water for the oil and gas lobby all day, every day. So, Manchin lays out this galaxy-brain position of prioritizing the terror of hypothetical battery charging lines instead of the actual gas lines that we've experienced. Or perhaps maybe he might be terrified of the obscene gas prices that the American working class is just outright unable to afford right now. Or maybe the way our gas addiction keeps us tethered to terrible regimes like the Saudis, or I don't know, the terror of climate devastation which the country and the world is already experiencing. But okay. If the imagined battery lines are your waking nightmare, you'd think that you would be into investing in electric charging stations to avoid such a calamitous and horrible fate. Nope, he's not down with that either. Manchin told the Houston Energy audience that he had a, quote, hard time understanding such investments, saying, "I've read history, and I remember Henry Ford inventing the Model T. But I sure as hell don't remember the US government building filling stations. The market did that." The crowd reportedly erupted with applause. Manchin's comments are not just absurd, though. They're also extremely depressing, because Joe Manchin is so much more than one politician bought off by the oil and gas industry, relentlessly pushing their propaganda. He is a living, breathing reminder of the fact that our security, our economic fate, and the fate of the whole planet are all tied to the actions of oil companies and their money. And it's a reminder that their interests have a stranglehold on our politics. It's a disaster, and one that has been made even more clear by our current predicament. As you probably know by now, here's the landscape. Now, you might have noticed gas prices in the US are at record highs. As I write this, yesterday, Americans were paying $4.33 per gallon. Our ban on Russian oil is not likely to help. In terms of other countries increasing output to lower cost, Saudi and the UAE are not taking our calls. Venezuela is still under sanctions and has degraded capacity anyway, and the renegotiation of the Iran nuclear deal is teetering on the brink of collapse. So how about our own domestic production? Well, these guys are certainly raking in record profits, so they could drill baby drill if they wanted to, but they don't. Exxon, Chevron, and Shell are among the 24 companies posting soaring profits in 2021, but uninterested in investing in increased production, instead padding the bank accounts of mostly already wealthy shareholders while you suffer at the pump. So, we got a situation where in the short term, we actually need these oil companies to produce more, and they won't. And then in the long term, we need them to produce less, and they also aren't going to do that. They're happy to engage in profit-maximizing capital strikes like what they're up to right now, but any transition away from utter deadly reliance on their product leads to an all-out offensive to kill any and all alternatives. They use their paid-off proxies, people like Joe Manchin, to prevent any sort of green options, even to the extent of bizarrely making the case against obvious infrastructure investments like upgrading the grid to accommodate more electric vehicles and electric charging stations. So, what would a policy suite look like that could incentivize short-term production but disincentivize long-term production? Well, we talked to an economist yesterday, Skandar Amarnath, about his plan, and it's got some things to recommend it. Use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to smooth oil prices so that oil companies aren't afraid to invest now. Use financing mechanisms to further incentivize that investment. Use the Defense Production Act to deal with supply chain issues that are also holding back that short-term investment. But this doesn't really address the other side of the equation. Now, I can come up with lots of oil company bribes that might get them off their duff now in the short term, but how do we get them to accept a managed decline later on when they are so gigantic and so powerful and so profoundly uninterested in anything other than their own profits? Oftentimes, the simplest answer is the correct one. If people are poor, you give them money. If they're sick, you give them care. If they're homeless, you give them housing. Rather than tweak and incentivize and hope to drive the result we want, we should nationalize the oil companies and directly achieve the outcome that we want. The outcome which is in the best interest of the American people for today and for tomorrow. As I mentioned yesterday, Matt Bruning of the People's Policy Project, he recently laid out the logic. He wrote, private owners and investors are not in the business of temporarily propping up dying industries, which means that they will either work to keep the industry from dying, which is bad for the climate, or that they will refuse to temporarily prop it up, which will cause economic chaos. A public owner is best positioned to pursue managed decline in a responsible way. It's funny, Fox News' Harris Faulkner, of all people, actually came the closest, accidentally, to making the direct case for this of anyone on cable news. Take a listen.
I think you're talking about red tape. And when I hear you say that, I think about one thing. Operation Warp Speed. Come on, we can do this. We did what the rest of the world couldn't with the last administration in Operation Warp Speed. We wiped away that red tape. And I say we as Americans, right? And then we got vaccines, plural. Why can't we do that with oil?
Yes, Harris, get the government directly involved. Really own Biden by taking it one step further and call for outright nationalization. Let's do it. Now, her comments are instructive because they actually reflect the fact that gas prices and oil production are a direct and vital interest of the American people. Energy production should be seen more like vaccines or public safety or, frankly, the internet. Essential public goods, where the public's interest is frequently at odds with the dictates of profit maximization. The sort of thing that shouldn't just be left to the whims of private profiteers, but should be accountable to a democratic process and shepherded by a public owner. Production could be managed to smooth costs and set to decline over an achievable, realistic time horizon, all the time socking profits away so that the workers who are sure to be decimated by the industry's decline will be protected. Now, if you go to Senator Joe Manchin's home state of West Virginia, you'll actually see what the alternative looks like. It looks like ecological devastation and economic desperation. The failing coal companies, they left workers sick and they left them impoverished. The hillsides and the mountains stripped. The political system thoroughly captured and blocked possibilities for alternative economic development in order to hold that workforce captive. Now, do I think that oil company nationalization is likely? Even in this moment, when it's so clear that our nation's security, economy, and livable future are in the balance and that they are such incredibly villainous actors? No, of course not. It's socialism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, UBI was once seen as fantastical, and it barnstormed its way into our suite of policy tools pretty quickly, so I guess, who knows? After all, nationalizing the gas companies would be a great way to own the neolibs, and if that can't bring us all together, I just don't know what can. The Joe Manchin comments were so profoundly depressing to me because it just shows you. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.